This video is about uncontacted tribes and fake news. So basically, in my life, I'm 47 years old. Many times I've heard about uncontacted tribes in the news media, and sometimes I've heard the phrase isolated tribes. And it would come up in the media, nobody would care about it, and it would die away. And then there was this one where it said uncontacted tribe person, and he was approaching the border between Peru and Brazil, and there was a video. And I watched the video, and I saw that it was fake news. And I'm going to explain to you what I saw, and at the end we'll talk about why it's fake news. So basically, there was this guy, and you can look up this video, where he was a tribal person. He was a chief, and he's shouting he's acting a little weird and shouting in his language, which of course nobody understands. And there was another guy who I presume was a Brazilian. They were standing in a river, and maybe there were people off in the distance from the tribe, and someone was video recording it. And he had a bunch of bananas, and he carried the bananas to this person, gave him the bunch of bananas, and the tribesman turned around, and that's when I said fake news. And the reason why is because he had a machete down his back in his skirt. And when I saw that, I said, this guy's not an uncontacted tribe. And the reason why it's fake news is because the people who are pushing this story, if they put isolated tribe, then it won't get any news coverage. So they put uncontacted tribe, because then you think, wow, there's a group of people somewhere that have never had contact with the outside world. Complete BS. Now this guy, this chief, they hit their head a lot, which means good, I seem to recall. I don't remember the word that they say, but they're always hitting their head when or maybe they do it like this, or maybe that's the Sentinel people, I don't remember. But he was making these weird movements because of the way they communicate. It's part of their communication. And he was saying one word that somebody recognized, which was the word for good, but I don't remember what it is. At some point, this video got translated into English. And then I discovered something else. He says the word Peruana. Peruana. He's shouting, he says, Peruanas. Peruana means Peruvian. And the story is that he was angry at Peruvians, loggers, and they would wear black shirts. I'm not a Peruvian logger. And it's all translated, and basically what he does is he comes out and he says, the Peruvian loggers, they're bad, they're bad, they're bad, they're bad, they're bad people. And the guy gives him the food, and he turns around and he goes back. And there's lots of videos with this guy, this chief. He's a young guy. So basically the story, the long story, is that his tribe was at peace, and they knew about the Peruvian loggers, and he said his father had told him about white men, but he didn't believe his father. And he was told that white men had once visited many years before he was born, which is why his father knew about them. And he said that they had stolen some clothing from somebody, and when they did that, half of his tribe died. He said they got sick and they died. Maybe he mentioned old people or his mother or something like that. And he said since then, the Peruanas, the Peruvians, had perhaps killed people in his tribe, and his tribe split into multiple groups. I don't know why that would happen, but that's what he said. So the Brazilians care about the isolated tribes. The Peruvians really don't. And the Brazilians are very active. They provide help for isolated tribes. They have clothing, for example, and they gave them shoes. And in one of the videos, the wife was holding up a pair of flip-flops, and she was like, yeah. She loved the flip-flops. She was in love with them, And there was a part in the video where he was trying to steal clothing from the guy who was the head of the Brazilian program, and the guy said, no, you cannot take this, because he knew that he could get sick, as the guy had actually said had happened. So he tells a story. He says, I'm the chief of my tribe, and he goes on about this story. It's all translated, and they are now in the care of the Brazilians. And I know from experience, and the same is true there, what happens with these tribes, some of them remain isolated, which means they continue their traditional lifestyle. Some of them are halfway civilized, meaning that they'll live in houses, but it will be in poverty. Like they probably don't have electricity, and they might have a TV, and they might have a motorcycle. And I've seen these houses. I sat in the backyard of one of these houses. They had a motorcycle and they had a TV, and they didn't have a door on their house, and it was very shoddy construction. It was like a shack, and there's always junk everywhere because they save everything, and everything is always in poor condition. And then you have the people who have fully transferred, meaning that they'll live in a regular house, maybe near the road, near a paved road. And when you walk around South America, you're going to see the people, the tribes people, walking around because they have very traditional clothing and they won't have shoes, and they look very indigenous. They don't look like a mix between Spanish and Colombian or Spanish and Peruvian. They look very indigenous, and they tend to be very short. And sometimes the women will be fat. And obviously they're always unkempt. And I would see lots of people walking around with no shoes on, sleeping on the streets, etc. And I would give them food every day. Every day I was giving food to lots of people. Well, okay, I'm sorry, usually to 2 or 3 people I would give food to. So the point that it's a very interesting video series. You can search for Brazil Uncontacted Tribe and watch the videos and the translations. It's a pretty cool story. But the point that I'm making is that it's fake news. And what happens is, ultimately, it's for money. They're going to say, well, to raise awareness. No, you're raising awareness because you want money somehow. Raising awareness to any part of the world does absolutely nothing for these people. You're doing it because you want to raise awareness so that you will receive donations and government grants. And putting it in English in a Portuguese-speaking country, what does that tell you? Are they trying to raise awareness in Brazil or not? The government already knows about these people and is already taking care of them and providing for them everything that they need: clothing, shoes, food, and they have a transition policy. Unfortunately, they have a hands-off transition policy, which I disagree with, which means they only offer help if they're asked for help. And the reality is that these people don't know that they can ask for help, and they spoke a language that no one else spoke, with the exception of the word Peruana. So there was a guy who knew the language, and he was one of the halfway people. So he lived nearby. He dressed like a Brazilian. He wore the, T-shirt, blue jeans or whatever, and he did the translation, and he was the one who said, oh yeah, that's the word for good, and he said he's the chief of the tribe and all that stuff. So somebody did know the language. Other people knew this tribe's language, or maybe he said it was similar to his language, etc. So they do this for profit. They get government grants, they get donations, and raising awareness, that's absolutely what it means. There's nothing other than that. And they have to lie about it. The people who say uncontacted when it's really not are the people who are involved with this, because what they have to do is write a press release and send it out to try and get attention, and the news media will print it out exactly as it says. And if it says isolated, they're going to ignore it, and if it says uncontacted, they'll say, oh wow, this is interesting, but they're not going to read deeper into it. Okay, if you have any questions or comments, please post below.